You're about to hear something that might leave you surprised. I'm a 45-year-old woman who's been married for 2 decades. It was the kind of marriage where, at the start, everything felt like a fairy tale. But as the years passed, the sparkle began to fade. The routine set in. The excitement of discovery, of newness, started to feel like a distant memory. It wasn't that I didn't love my husband, but the connection was no longer the same. The quiet moments turned into repetitive ones, and I found myself longing for something different. Something more. I began to wonder about what was out there, but I had no intention of letting my husband know. The guilt of wanting something else was heavy, but my curiosity outweighed the weight of it. I was searching for an escape, not just physically, but mentally too. So, I started reaching out to people online, strangers, people my husband didn't know. Through Instagram and messaging apps, I found small ways to break free from the confines of my world. Most of the people I met online didn't interest me much, but it gave me something. A distraction. One morning, while my husband was off to work, I was scrolling through Instagram when something caught my eye. It was a profile I didn't expect to see, my husband's friend, John. I knew him well, but we hadn't had many deep conversations over the years. Still, I couldn't help myself. I started scrolling through his photos. There was something about his presence in those images, something familiar but also exciting. Before I knew it, I had liked one of his photos from 5 years ago. It was a simple mistake. I didn't think much of it. But an hour later, my phone buzzed. It was a message from John. "Hey, long time no see. Looks like you've been checking out some old photos." I froze for a moment. My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't believe it. He had noticed. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let the moment pass. But something in me made me reply, "Yeah, that's an old one. How have you been?" His response came quickly, "I'm good, thanks. It's been a while. What's new with you?" In that instant, it felt like I was opening a door to something new. Something I didn't realize I was craving. We chatted briefly, and it quickly turned into something more. John's words had a way of drawing me in. There was something magnetic about him, not just in the way he looked, but in how he communicated. I could feel the spark growing. Without thinking, I typed, "How about grabbing a coffee sometime?" To my surprise, he replied quickly, "Why not? How about later this evening?" I was nervous, unsure of what I was doing, but it felt too tempting to resist. My heart raced as the hours passed, the excitement blending with a layer of guilt. But I couldn't help it. I was ready for a change. When I arrived at the meeting spot, the evening air was cool, refreshing. I felt my heart beating faster with each step. And then, there he was. John stood tall, waiting for me with a coffee cup in his hand. He smiled, and for a moment, all my anxieties melted away. "Hey, it's been a while. Do you remember me?" he said, a playful tone in his voice. "Of course, how could I forget?" I responded shyly. We laughed, and the tension started to lift. As we ordered coffee and sat down at an outdoor table, I felt like I was seeing him in a new light. There was a certain comfort in his presence, but also an undeniable attraction that I hadn't expected. "So, how's married life treating you?" he asked, casually. It was the kind of question that seemed innocent, but it hit me in a way I didn't anticipate. I paused, unsure of how to respond. How could I explain the emptiness I'd been feeling? "Honestly, it's been okay. Everything feels a bit routine. I want to try new things, but I'm scared," I admitted. He looked at me intently, nodding. "Don't be afraid. Sometimes you have to take risks to really live. You've got to make space for what you want." His words lingered in my mind. It was like a light had been turned on, casting a new glow on everything. My heart raced, and I found myself asking, "So, have you ever felt that way?" John's smile deepened. "There have been times when I chased after something forbidden. It's thrilling. The excitement is what makes it worth it." I could feel my pulse quicken as his words hit me like a spark. The boundaries I had set for myself started to fade. The old me, the one who would have never entertained these thoughts, was slipping away. Well, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, maybe we should try something together. I couldn't believe I had just said that. I was taking a risk, but it felt right. John grinned, a knowing smile. That's the spirit. Let's make tonight one to remember. We left the coffee shop and walked to a bar he had in mind. It was one of those places full of energy, laughter, and music. The lights and the noise felt like a world away from everything I had known. The feeling of freedom was intoxicating. Let's dance, John said, pulling me into the crowd. His hands were on my waist, and I could feel the heat of his body against mine. I wasn't thinking about the consequences. I wasn't thinking about anything but the moment, the thrill, the connection. As we danced, the world seemed to disappear. It was just us, moving to the rhythm of the music, our bodies in sync. I had never felt so alive. His eyes, his smile, they all made me feel seen in a way I hadn't experienced in a long time. After a while, John leaned in and whispered, "If you're up for it, we can take this night even further. There's a place I know where we can be alone." My heart raced, a cocktail of excitement and fear. "Let's do it," I said, almost breathless. We slipped out of the bar and into the night. As we walked down the dimly lit streets, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my husband. "Where are you? Is it time to come home?" A wave of guilt washed over me, but it quickly dissipated. I didn't want to think about home. Not tonight. "We should stay out a little longer," I told John. "Let's see where this takes us." He looked at me, his smile reassuring. "Tomorrow, we'll make a plan. But tonight, let's just enjoy the ride." The night was ours. When we reached the next place, a quiet spot away from the city, I felt like I was living in a dream. The world seemed still, just the two of us, and the promise of something new and exciting. The evening passed in a blur of laughter, stories, and stolen moments. I felt free, liberated from the constraints of my life. As I left the next morning, I realized something. This night with John wasn't just an adventure. It was the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one that I wasn't sure I was ready for but couldn't resist. I knew things were changing, and I wasn't sure where it would lead. But one thing was certain, I had made a decision. The future, whatever it held, was mine to shape.